Hi Liz, how
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm just getting all of this little housekeeping that I need to do before I can start. Um, do I have the right? What was your email that you used to send over information?
Mm, did you want me to put it in the chat or do you want me to just say it out loud?
Oh, actually, I forgot I'm recording. Is it the Nelson 03? Is that
Mm,
one?
no, it's 314. It ends in 314.
Okay. Do I have two? Oh, I do. Okay. I have an Elizabeth and I have a Lizette. And y'all are
Yes.
right. So the way it did it in order. So okay, perfect. Because I was gonna start talking about the other person's story
No, you're
instead
good.
of yours. Okay, that's so funny. All right. So have you had a chance to uh listen to any of the other episodes?
Yes, I have. Actually, the person that recommended like I should be on your podcast was a professor who uses a lot of like your TikTok material and things like that to just sort of like show us how these like experiences like um translate to like practice because I'm a social work major.
Okay.
Yeah, so she uses a lot of your material and that's kind of she was like, you should do it, like you should go. And I was like, okay.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that my education has made it to the classrooms. Make me feel better.
Yes.
Because sometimes I be on TikTok like, this is not worth it, bro. This is not worth it. All right. So yeah, it's about 45 minutes to an hour, probably leaning towards 45 minutes because I have several recordings to do today.
Okay.
And then the way that the show runs, like you've heard on the show. So it's
Hmm.
mostly just like your lived experience. I will kind of guide a little bit with the information that you shared with on the Google form. There will be a break in the middle of the conversation just so I can do a commercial break for the podcast. And last thing is I always offer everyone a chance to either use their real names and alias, or they can go like a lot of people use like their social media handles. So what
Okay.
would you like to be referred to at for our conversation today?
You could just use my name. Liz is fine.
Liz. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And see any other things. You sent back your consent form, correct?
Yes, I did.
Awesome. So I'll just get that later. And yeah, so we're gonna go. I'm gonna do a countdown, and then I'll introduce you, um, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. All right, in five, four, three. Hey, Light Shiners, welcome to another episode of Word to the State podcast. I am just so thrilled. I'm just so happy, y'all, because I just got today. I'll let y'all know very transparent. So I record a lot of episodes on one day because I have ADHD. And if I don't, then they won't get recorded. So I've had so many chances to speak to so many adoptees today and former foster youth. And, I've cried, I've laughed, and I have a couple more to do today. And I just love how this platform and this podcast just tells everyone's story and gives everyone's lived experience and how different all of our experiences are, but we all have so many things that are so similar as well. So I just want to thank you all for supporting. As always, please make sure you're leaving a five-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and also make sure you are subscribing to us on Spotify and share. I just found out that they plan this in college. They plan this in colleges. So there we go. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. Appreciate the support. But without further ado, I want to introduce my next adoptee. Their name is Liz. Hey, Liz, how are you?
Hi there. I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your lived experience. And before I started the show, Liz was sharing with me that the way that they found out about the podcast was through their professor. So that's why I was like, thank you, professor. Whoever the professor is, I really appreciate it because I never hear where the information is going. I just put it out into the zeitgeist. And then sometimes people will comment or they'll send me DMs. But like the fact that you're a social work major and like they're telling you guys to listen to us, that's so important. And it's so encouraging. So just thank you for sharing that with me. But let's start with your story. You were adopted at birth, correct?
Yes.
So where,
Okay.
when, how, and who is Liz?
Okay, for sure. So I'll just start at the beginning. So I was born in 2001. So that's 21 years ago, like last month. So I'm actually coming up on like the anniversary of like my adoption this month. Um,
And
yeah, and
how does that make
uh,
you feel? Like, do you ever celebrate your adoption anniversary or your
um,
gotcha days, like what a lot of adoptive parents like to call it?
yeah. So like the thing is like my adoptive parents don't really like we don't really like talk about it. It's kind of one of those things that isn't like talked about, but it's like known.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll go into like detail about that in a bit. Yeah, so I was born in like the East LA area. I don't know if you've ever been to California. I believe you're from Seattle.
Yeah, no, I lived in Seattle for
Oh,
7
Seattle.
years. I'm originally from Detroit, and then I lived
Yes.
in Florida for a few years during college. But I have visited LA a lot. It's
Okay, cool.
very
Yeah.
beautiful city.
Yeah, very, very. We're from like the east side of LA. There's a lot of predominantly black and brown people there. So that's where I was like sort of born into in July to my biological dad and my biological mom. A couple weeks after I was born, my biological mom passed away, unfortunately. She was 43 years old when she had me, after having had 11 or 12 children.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot, a big family. Her body just wasn't meant to have any more children, but because of all the like trauma that comes with being like uh born into a Hispanic family and that sort of culture, there's a lot of pressure to have like big families and keep like men happy, and it's very like patriarchal. So she kind of had me as a way to like sort of like keep my biological dad around. Unfortunately, I was born 8 years after the sibling before me. So my older sibling 8 years after, and then me. And it was just sort of like a last resort. And she ended up passing away due to complications of having me. And then my dad just was
Oh
like,
no.
bye. He said, peace out. I'm out of here. Like, I don't really want to know about you
So
guys.
did all of your siblings go into the system or get
Mhm.
adopted?
Yeah, we all ended up going into the system for a very like short amount of time because by that point I had an older brother who was already 22 and then an older sister who was already 20. So my oldest brother ended up with most of like my other siblings, like half of us, and then the my sister that had adopted me ended up like with me, and the social worker was kind of like, you're lucky that you're 21. Like, you're lucky you just turned 21, because if not, we would have to, like, I would have had to go through, like, the foster system and end up with a family that I didn't know because my brother already had so many.
Now, how did the state offer any support to your two siblings, like financial support
Yeah,
to help you all?
they did. The social worker told my oldest brother, like, you could still put child support on your dad. Like, he's still financially responsible for all 12 of his kids. Like, you should do it. You should put in the child support paperwork and put child support on your dad. And he ended up doing that. So once I ended up moving to like where I live now, which is like Baldwin Park, by the time I was like around 5 or 6, my biological dad came to my sister's house, my mom's house, saying like, "Why did you put child support on me? You know I can't afford it." Like, and that was the first time I ever met this man, and I didn't know he was my dad. I just knew he kind of looked like me, and I was like, "Oh, that's probably like my grandpa," because he was already old. Like now he's 70, so back then he was like 50 something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So your sister, so did he ended up paying, did he ever pay or did they ever get support or like how did they financially
No.
take care of 5 kids each?
No, they didn't. They ended up just my brother ended up taking away the child support and was like, "We don't need your money then, I guess. Like just don't confine them because you're literally like traumatizing them. This is so hard for them, like just having lost their mom because they remember their mom, but I don't, obviously. So they were dealing with that on top of like my dad doesn't want to take care of me. So my brother ended up getting a job, just a normal, regular job. I'm not sure what he did. And he had a wife who they already had 2 children by this point. And they were just sort of working to like support all these children. And then my mom, my sister too, was like had a husband, but they didn't have children. They were 21. So um, together they were like, okay, we'll just provide for these children. Like, it's okay. Like, we'll find a way to make it work. Because that's just sort of the mindset that I feel like people going through difficult times are like, we're just gonna make it work.
Yep. Yep, I agree. So, oh wow, my goodness. I've never this is why I do this podcast because like I've never experienced a kinship type story like this. So, how was your experience growing up with your adoptive mom who's your sister? But you were a baby, so really it's kind of like she's more
Mm-hmm.
of a mom than she is of a sister to you because you
Mm-hmm.
never established, a sibling relationship with her since she adopted you as an infant. How has that been
Yeah.
for you?
It's been a little like definitely like been like really trying because like she didn't want me to know that I was adopted. She just kind of wanted to keep that like put away. Like she's like she doesn't need to know that. Like we already take care of her. But I remember one time I had gone to another sister's house. And she's the one that told me, she's like, you're adopted. Like, that's why you have a different last name from, because my parents have three of their own biological children. And I consider them my younger siblings, and they consider me their older sister, but they don't know that I'm adopted. That's why I said it's kind of like one of those things that, like,
Wait, so your siblings, who are technically your nieces and nephews,
yes,
don't know that they're your nieces and nephews?
no, they don't. They just kind of are like, oh,
Do you,
that's weird. She has a different last name. Like,
not only is this just wrong, like, but like that they will eventually find out because
yeah,
of family trees. And like, could you imagine growing up and it's someone's like your aunt? And so what do they learn about their grandmother? Like how do they get that story? Because technically their grandmother is your mother. So do they know anything about their
yeah.
grandmother?
They just kind of know that she passed away around the same time that I was born. Um, and that
Yo,
was
this is
it.
a lifetime movie, yo. Like, you better write a book, you better write a screenplay or something because this I this is so, in my opinion, this is
Yes.
very harmful and wrong. Like, I'm glad that your sister took you in. Like, I'm not saying that
Yeah,
I'm so glad that she did that, but like, you cannot hide stuff like this. You cannot hide stuff like this because
of
that's
course.
it's family,
Of
especially if it's
course.
family. So, like, what is the benefit? I don't understand. What's the benefit of keeping it a secret?
I think she just doesn't really want them to like see me any different or like treat me any different or like kind of make the dynamic that we have like different because like I share a room with my younger brother. He's 16. Um, So we like share a room and he tells me everything like just like a normal like sibling relationship would and
But
um
the issue is the longer you
yeah.
guys establish a sibling bond, the harder it will be
Yeah.
for them once they realize that's not my sister.
Yeah, that's
Because
what
technically you're not, like, I'm
yeah.
sorry, sibling bonds are different than family
Yeah.
bonds. Like me and my brothers and my sister, like, yeah, we can hate each other and stuff, but at the end of the day, like, that's my sister. We like shared the
Mm-hmm.
same womb, and like that's not it's
Yeah. Yeah. It's
this is
something that
why I tell people all the time, tell your children that they're adopted in the family at the beginning, because if they grew up just knowing that, oh, this is our aunt, but she's like our sister, but she's literally like our sister, then that wouldn't be a big deal. That
mm-hmm.
really wouldn't be a big deal. They would treat you the same. But now they're going to be adults, 18, 19 years old, and then thinking
Yeah.
that they grew up with their sister who was their aunt. And
Mm-hmm.
then like grandpa didn't pay child support. Like a lot is going on.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom is just kind of waiting till like they're sort of at a mental like state to where they can understand like why she made the decisions she made, I guess. Because my mom is like obviously her own person and she's like her own being and has reasons for why what she does. Like, I don't really agree with most of what she does, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's her decision. Because I mean, yeah, I could tell them, but I feel like that's most of it is also like her trauma as well, and that's not for me to be like putting out there into
No,
like the
I
world.
100% disagree with you. That's
Yeah.
not her trauma at all. That's literally your trauma. Your adoption is your story.
Yeah.
That's your trauma. If you choose not to share because you don't
Hmm.
want to, that's completely
Yeah.
valid. But don't silence yourself
Yeah.
because of the emotions of your mom. Like
Hmm.
I don't think that that's fair. That's not her
Yeah.
story. It's literally not her story. It's literally your story. It's
Yeah.
your story. So
Yeah.
don't not tell it because you feel like it's her story to tell.
Hmm.
It's not. It's yours. But I do respect that you do respect like her and that
Hmm.
like her decision to tell her children because
Yeah.
ultimately those are her children
Yeah.
and those are technically your nieces and nephews. So there are,
Hmm.
and that's what creates this power imbalance thing, because if
Yes.
you were siblings, at the end of the day, siblings, okay, so I'm putting myself in a perspective of like like your sibling.
Hmm.
Like you said, your brother shares everything with you. So how do you think he would feel once he's going to find out, like, oh, I've been
Yeah.
like my sister lied to me her entire life, and like that? Oh,
Yeah.
y'all gonna need some family therapy when this all comes out. Just prepare yourselves.
Yeah. Like
Family
that's what
therapy.
I'm in therapy right now, and my therapist is like, we could go through this together. We'll schedule a session with you and your brother together, and we'll go through this. And he's like, just when
So
you're ready, obviously.
so your kinship adoption, it sounded like overall, I mean, you're 21 years old, you're in
Hmm.
college, everyone didn't got saved from the foster care system, which I commend your brother and your sister for
Hmm.
doing. That's a lot of responsibility to take in
Hmm.
several younger siblings. That's amazing of them to do that. Growing up, you know, what type of adoption trauma do you, because you say you really don't talk about it. So you
Hmm.
really have been raised to be their child. Where are you now in your knowledge of adoption trauma or the fog, or are you even out of the fog? Like how is your experience now knowing like about your adoption?
Yeah, I think right now just sort of like I've been exploring more like just what it means to be adopted, and like you talked about the fog, I don't think I'm completely like out of it just because I do sort of defend my mom for a lot of the poor decisions like she's made. And that's obviously like not okay, but that's something I need to like work up to just sort of getting over. And that's why I am in therapy, and my therapist is really great, and he's sort of like he always had the same reaction, like just the same reaction you did. He's like, "Wow, that's a lot." Like he's like, "Whether you share or don't share, that's something I commend you for because it's a lot to hold in, but it's also a lot to let out." So just
It really is. Like that's a lot. That's a lot, and it's not traditional. And this is
hmm.
why I do this podcast, because this is not a traditional, even a traditional kinship adoption. This is,
Yeah.
you were an infant, and had your other sister never told you, you would have went through your entire life possibly
Yeah.
thinking that you were just their child, which, you know, I know that there's harmful effects because of the primal wound.
Hmm.
And if you haven't read the primal wound, I would greatly advise you to go read that. It's a great book. But it like there every, especially if your mother died at birth, like every child, like you never got to experience any time with your
Hmm.
birth mother. So there's a lot that has happened in your infancy. Um, and the
Hmm.
trauma compounded on then having to keep that lie and not be able
Yeah.
to even to like talk about that wound can be compounding. It
Hmm.
can be a whole lot. And there's like you said, there's a stigma around adoption, which is why people don't want to talk about it. But there are
Hmm.
reasons why I advocate for not changing the birth certificates, why I advocate for permanent guardianship. And if you do by chance have to adopt, it needs to be open to the biological families. And if you do kinship care, um, I personally don't see a reason to adopt a person within your family, because we have kinship guardianship, because they're
Hmm.
already related to you. There's no,
Yeah.
there's no, I mean, for legal reasons, you can just do permanent guardianship and make sure
Hmm.
that you're their legal guardian. But
Hmm.
there was no reason to change your identity. There's no reason to
Yeah.
raise you as their own.
Hmm.
There's no reason for that. I'm very confused at why like that was even done.
Yeah.
Um, and it happens a lot. It happens so often. There's an difficult adoptee was adopted by a cousin who she thought was her parents up until like recently. And she's like, "Oh
Yeah.
wow, like why would my cousins lie to me? Like why?" And
Yeah.
then you go around, everyone in your family is different. So like your grandma's actually just like your sister or something. Like it's like some
Yeah.
crazy shit, like
Yeah.
it just makes every relationship from that point on feel a little weird. But I don't know, because I've never experienced that. I, I
Hmm.
I know how it feels to be adopted into a family that no one knows you, and you
Yeah.
have to be like, "Oh, this is my grandma. Hey, grandma," and you just like it's a random person you've never met. But
Hmm.
I can only imagine how that would be to like have to readjust
Hmm.
what people are to you or who they are as part of your family tree after
Yeah.
that information. How was that for you?
Um, it was a little like confusing because obviously like you go through school and they ask you to do like family trees or things like that. So I was just kind of like always confused like which family tree do I put? Do I use the one my mom's always just sort of fed to me or do I put the one that I know to be true? Like, and then I would talk to teachers about it because like who else do you talk to when you're like 11 or 12? Like and I remember it was for a science class, and this teacher, he was a white man. His name, like, he was just like he didn't. I told him, and he was like, "What?" Like, and I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I didn't know that happens," and I was like, It does." He's like, "I've heard about like, he's like, I've been teaching in this community for I don't know how many years, and I've seen like grandparents like raise their like grandchildren, but never siblings," and I was like. There's a first for everything. Like, so he was really like no help. He made it more just like about him and what he had seen. And I was like,
It sounds about
"Mm,
what they do to all of us. It's like
yeah.
that's literally what they do to all of us. But it's so weird because I was just talking to another adoptee in my previous interview, and they had a completely different um, situation than mine, but we still had similar situations and
Hmm.
and events, kind of like going to school, like what family tree to pull up.
Yeah.
And I was adopted by white folks, and we had in my school we had to like read our family tree to the class and like present it in a presentation. And I was like, my people come from England, and people were like, no, yo. And then the thing was, I was over here being like, my grandmother, my great grandparents on my father's side is Anglo-Saxon, and he's actually maybe related to the King of England. And I remember this one kid, his name was Neil in my class, and he was like, there ain't no Africans in England. And that's ignorant because we do know there are Africans in England. But during
Yeah.
that time, like, but like he was right though. Like he was right. That he kept calling me out. He was like, "Those aren't your parents. That's not your. That's not your
Yeah.
people." And I like it was, and they all laughed. And it's I will never not ever forget that in my life. And it's just like
Yeah.
that's why it's harmful. And I always tell people because I'm trying to instead of trying to teach people not to adopt because I feel like that's not working. Um, I'm shifting it to educate on guardianship and in the people who've already adopted. Let me just
Hmm.
try to make it a little bit better. If you go to these school events and they ask about the family tree, this is why you should tell your children that they're adopted. So then you can encourage them to make two
Hmm.
family trees, and they could just make two family trees, and that's what should have happened for me. Like, and for you, you should have really, you
Hmm.
don't need two family trees because your family tree is the same. They just rearranged the people. Like,
Yeah, because like when I did that family tree, I just ended up using like obviously like my sister as my mom, and then like just my biological parents as my grandparents, and then the whole other half of the family tree is like
but
my
that messes
sister's
up your
husband.
family tree because it doesn't. That's not right because your
Yeah,
grandparents, those aren't your grandparents. Those are
yeah,
your parents.
yeah. And I would just kind of go and I was like, I feel like I'm lying. This doesn't feel good. But then they would just like post it and then take it down at the end of the week. And I was like, can I have it back? And then just like throw it away and forget about it.
That is crazy. That is insane. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about more about the stigma around adoption.
Hmm.
I want to talk about informal adoptions and get to know more about your story. Okay, Liz?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. We really don't take a real break. I usually just do another countdown. Unless
Yeah.
you need to go to the bathroom or get a drink or anything.
No, I'm good.
Awesome. All righty. Five, four, three. Hey, Light Shiners, welcome back to the show. So, like I always say in every commercial, please make sure you're supporting us. We need to make sure that we can keep getting these stories out. Every adoptee and former foster youth experience is important and valid. And we need to make sure that our voices, all of our voices, are heard. I think the more that we get to get interesting stories and perspectives, like even like Liz is here, it gives us better knowledge of what adoptions really truly look like and what kinship care looks like, and what kinship adoption may look like, and how it can be hurtful and harmful and helpful, depending on the knowledge in the child being trauma or it being child centered and the parents being trauma informed. So please make sure that you are leaving that 5-star rating review on Apple Podcast. And if you can, by any way, send a donation to carlosdiller.com. There is a donate to the podcast link. Any amount is appreciated so we can keep these stories coming. So, Liz,
Hmm.
you're with your mom, who's your sister. Sorry,
Yes.
I got
No, you're good.
okay. So now I'm going to start asking some personal questions. So you're
Hmm.
21,
Yes.
you're a social work major. You're old enough to have your own children.
Yes.
Will you tell your children the truth?
Mm, yeah, definitely, because that's not something that I would want to keep from them, just because like that's obviously a whole day. It's gonna be the same as like keeping it from my younger siblings. It's just gonna hurt them more and more the longer I keep it. And as far as like, um, obviously keep things like age appropriate and be like, you know what, this is how it is. Like, so it's not too much like trauma dumping on a child because you also want to be mindful of that. But it's definitely something I would want them to know because it also only opens up like perspective and like different ways people live and it makes it a reality. It makes it real because it's like my mom lived this. So yeah, it's not just like something like that exists only in like movies or TV shows or things like that.
Exactly. And that's why I talk about a lot on social media. People's ideal of what adoption is literally primarily from Hollywood or kind now social
Hmm.
media. But then like even on social media, you don't really much see people being like, "Hi, I'm adopted and my adoption was fantastic." Like like you
Yeah.
don't I'm still waiting to come across an account that just only advocates for positive adoptions because they don't
Yeah.
exist. Because I'm like if so many people are like their adoptions was so great, where are all of y'all and why? Because they commented I'm adopting my adoption scream like you got 4 followers, like why don't you make I that's why I started this podcast, because I want to hear about all of the experiences. And I've had
Yeah.
several adoptees come on and be like, my adoption was actually really great, and but I still do understand why you all advocate the way that you do, because just because
Hmm.
my experience was good doesn't mean that it's going to be a monolith for everyone. Which I'm getting educated on kinship care here, because
Hmm.
I do advocate for kinship care. I've always advocated for kinship care instead of foster placement. But now I think I need to specify my advocacy, because you can't just be out here telling people that your sister is your baby. Like that is not, in my opinion, that
Yeah.
is not right. So yeah, kinship care can have its benefits. You stay in the family, you have your cultural mirroring, you have family connections and family history and knowledge, medical history, which is the most important. But you can still go about that, now I'm learning, and still do harm to
Yeah.
adoptee.
Yeah, definitely. It creates like an identity crisis that I didn't ask for. And
I
I'm
love
like,
that. You're like, I didn't ask for, well, but that's literally every adoptee.
yeah.
No one asked for this. No one asked for this. I was actually talking about it earlier. I got into some TikTok beef with another adoptee, another transracial adoptee. And I just recently, in the last couple of years, started unpacking my racial trauma from my adoption, because I was adopted by white folks who
Hmm.
were Christian, Catholic, Republicans, and
Hmm.
conservatives. And I had a lot of unpacking of internalized racism that I literally grew up around. And I was like, oh no, there's no way I could be racist or I can have racist ideologies. But I can have racist ideologies even as a Black man. And I
Hmm.
grew up for the majority of my life, like even when I first started doing social media, I used to call myself the conservative gay atheist. And now at 30 years old, I'm like, wait, how can you be a Black conservative gay atheist? These words don't even make sense in a sentence. But I was just, but in my mind, it made sense. But then after I started unpacking it, I was like, anything that's conservative is opposite of you, because they want to conserve their way of life, which was not you. Their way of life
Hmm.
was your people being slaves, your people being indentured servants, your people being less than. So even like I was voting against my own interests. I was talking against my own interests as a Black adoptee. And I think a lot of adoptees experience that identity crisis, and it takes
Hmm.
years for us, some of us especially. And I think the thing is, especially those of us who've had a positive experience with their transracial adoption, you don't want to see that, like, if your parents really were good parents, like overall
Hmm.
good parents, but they didn't see color, they didn't really teach you about race, especially if you were adopted of another race, how good were they? How much did they truly prepare you for?
Hmm.
And that's a lot to unpack as an adult, because then you start to see your parents in a different light. And if you were raised by white folks in a white town, have all white friends, married a white man, like all of these things will affect your
Hmm.
way, your point of view and the way that you see life. And that only adds on to, like you said, that only adds on to identity crisis that none of us asked for. I didn't, I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't ask to be wondering like why if I'm white voting or Black voting. Like I didn't even ask to be here. listen, I didn't ask
Yeah,
to be here on this planet. So like that was even unfair. the further
exactly.
the further you get, I forget what they call it, but the further you start to go into adoptee talk, I at least I find myself on this. It's like not anti-infancies, but like they don't believe in like having children because people can't consent. Antinatalism, I think it's
Oh
antinatalism.
no.
And I'm like, but it starts to make sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true because no child asked to be
Yeah.
here. So you're making a selfish decision as a
Yeah.
human being to bring in another human being into this life that did not ask to be here. And then
Exactly.
most of our parents come into this life to say we have to be grateful or we owe them. We don't
Yeah.
owe you shit. You literally chose to bring us here, bitch. Like, so
I did
like
not ask to be alive.
I did not. So as the further you get into adoption talk, you start to make your way to antinatalism talking like that makes sense because they didn't ask. No one asked to be
Yeah.
here, actually.
Yeah, I always ask my partner, like, we'll have kids if you give me a good reason to have kids. Just why do you want to have kids? Give me a good reason that isn't because I want them and like, because it's convenient for you. Like, give me an answer that has nothing to do with either of those. And they
And
can't.
that's one reason why I don't have kids. Everyone's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you'd be such a good parent. Why don't you have kids?" I'm like, one, I like to travel too. So it's too much. Like I like
Oh,
to get
yeah.
on a plane once a month and get up out of here. But two, I don't care. Like, well, don't you want to leave a legacy? Do you
No.
Google my name? That's big. That's better. I got books. I got podcasts. I got YouTube. My legacy is there. It's there. I don't need a little minion running around. And the thing is, like I don't believe in like it's that selfish. Do you want to leave a who the fuck are you? Are you who are you? That makes you such a good human that you need to make a legacy. Like it's so self-centered. I just think parenting in itself, it's self-centered, especially
Yeah.
with the knowledge that like we are in freaking climate change. The earth is dying. We're overpopulated. We
Yeah.
don't have enough people, can't even afford to feed the children after they have them. So it's like, no, I'm good actually.
I'm
I'm
okay.
good.
I'm okay. I came across like a podcast with I think it was Johnny Knoxville, and he was talking about how he's like, I think like to be a parent, it should be like getting a driver's license. Like you should have to have a license to parent. Like I don't know who would give it out. I haven't thought about the logistics, but I wholeheartedly believe there's some people that just shouldn't have
No,
children.
so I think that it's not even parents. I think it's men. I think men,
Yeah.
people with penises that can make children, because women are just like procreating by themselves. I think that there should be mandated vasectomies starting at the age of 13 for every
Yeah.
American man. And it can be reversed once you can prove financially that you have a credit score and a job to take care of a family
Yeah.
of four. Other than that, there's no need for it. I mean, you can't take care of the family. You can't just like,
Yeah.
I mean, your family is a perfect example. I hate to call out your daddy like that, but how
No,
you
you're
have
good.
11 kids and you can't
And like he like left a whole it's not like he just like disappeared and went somewhere like in California. He left to a whole other country. He went back to Mexico and was like,
and
I'm
now
just
has a whole family over there.
I don't think he has a whole family over there, not that I'm aware, but he'll just like he just kind of was like so he like has a habit of like going there to let things blow over and then come back and act like nothing happened.
He got a family over there. You know he got a family over there. He got
I
11
wouldn't
kids in the
doubt it.
United States. You know he got about 5 or 6 in Mexico.
Dude,
Like
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it.
so okay, adoption, stigma, and informal adoptions. What do you
Mhm.
think about what can we do to change? What can we do to break the stigma? And what can we do to educate people on what informal and what are informal adoptions in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think informal adoptions, so like in my case, like specifically, um, I never got like my parents never got my dad's signature for like an actual adoption, like a legal like actual adoption. So they just kind of were like, you guys like me and my sister have the same last name, so they're like nobody's gonna like
So
question
wait,
it.
you
So
never went to so you are not legally adopted by your sister
mm-mm,
legally.
I don't not that I'm aware.
Is her
She
name on your birth certificate?
oh no, she's not no.
Okay,
No,
wait,
yeah.
hold a minute. Wait a second.
See, we're learning together.
So Yeah, that's called an illegal adoption.
Yeah.
Happens a lot when so what happens now, so what usually your situation was very unique because you already shared
Hmm.
last name, so it would have been easier for her to
Yeah.
like say I'm the mom because we have the same last name.
Hmm.
But what people who aren't related do is they coerce biological mothers while they're pregnant. When they give birth, they say, hey, just give the baby my last name and just give me the baby. That way we don't have to do an official adoption. And no one bats an eye usually, because like who, no one knows enough about this. No one knows that
Yeah.
no one knows that this is happening. So no one's really checking. And then when you enroll them in school, they're just like, oh, here I have a birth certificate. She probably does have your birth certificate, and it
That's
has y'all's last name on it because y'all share a mother. But
yeah.
they're not literally looking at her name that's on the file and their name that's on it, the other name that's on the birth certificate. Because if they did, they'd be like, these are two different people.
That's the thing. Like we would go show up to school registration days and they ask like, can I see your ID? Can I see like the birth certificate? Like, can I see like a medical record to confirm that this is a child you're enrolling? Like all of that stuff. And then they would see that my sister's name and my mom's name didn't match up. And they'd be like, well, we can't enroll her in school. And then
So what would you guys do?
nothing. She would just tell the school like exactly everything I just told you. And then they would just kind of like, uh, okay, and then just enroll me in school.
Would she say that I adopted them? Did she say like, oh, I
Mm-mm.
adopted? She's
No, no, they told her like my dad isn't here. I don't have like legal court papers, like
but I'm old
but
enough.
to take care of her. Like if you need me to prove to you,
How did
like
CPS even? I mean, it's kinship care, so there
yeah,
she was just old enough to go. You were just she was
yeah,
old enough, and you could go with her.
yeah. That's
So they what?
exactly what
So did
happened.
CPS even? So you didn't even have like a social worker growing up. No one came to check
No,
on you.
no, I didn't have a social worker. Just the only I never met a social worker. Just all I know is that we had
Oh
a
my
social worker
god,
in the
this is
beginning, and then
oh my God. Because that's why I asked her. I said, did they offer any financial support? Because I'm
no,
thinking like they put you in foster care and then
no,
they gave your siblings like legal guardianship, like
mm-mm.
actual legal guardianship and adoption. That's oh my God.
No, that's why that's kind of like what motivated me to like go into social work because I was like, this is so like this isn't right. Something isn't adding up. Like she shouldn't be able to just take me into a school like that and do that. Like thankfully it worked out in my case, but I can't imagine like what would happen to other kids who are just kind of like, this isn't,
They end up not being able to go to school, and then they have to go
yeah.
be homeschooled where they end up
Mm-hmm.
being abused because no one's really checking on them. Like, and the fact
Exactly.
that no one, I'm glad that you weren't abused, but what if your
Mm-hmm.
sister wasn't a good person?
Yeah, that's kind of like what it's like one of those what ifs that like adds to just like my
Because you could
identity
have just been,
crisis
and
and
this is
like
why children disappear
yeah.
20, because
Hmm.
you disappeared essentially. You disappeared essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is like now that I'm a social work major and I'm going back into like essentially the system to try to work for the system, my case comes up, but it just comes up as like it was never closed.
Yeah, because they didn't do anything.
And I was like, what? So I kind of like left it alone because I was like, damn, like I don't know
And not
how to.
only is that harmful, but like technically you aren't a ward of the state and technically you're not adopted.
Hmm.
So you don't qualify for any, like even like some of the
Exactly.
programs that I work with, and we're like, oh, we can give you up to, we give adoptees up to the age of 26. We give you like $1,000 grants every month. You don't
Exactly.
qualify for that because you weren't
Exactly.
adopted. And then I'm like, oh, but there's government programs that you can help you through college because you're a ward of the state. You weren't a ward of the state. So like,
Hmm.
this is insane. This is
Yeah.
insanity. This is
So
literal insanity.
that in my head is sort of like an informal adoption because I know I'm not the only one that like deals with
No,
this.
so that's not that. See, that's not. I like how you put that informal. That's an illegal. Say it with me.
Yeah.
Illegal adoption. It's happening more often now.
Hmm.
I that's kind of what I do on TikTok. I've been saving babies from illegal
Hmm.
adoptions on TikTok for the last several months, and people don't. People, no one like you said that even at your school,
Hmm.
like everyone's like, so what's the big deal? I'm like, what's the big deal? There's no background checks. There's no
Hmm.
home studies. There's no financial check to see if your sister was even financially able. How
Hmm.
did they know that she was going to be able to take care of like 5 kids?
Yeah. They just kind of just like left it alone and thankfully she was. And the another way that we ended up receiving funds was through a social security like fund that like they give children when their parents die when they're
Yeah.
yeah, but that was it. And to split that up between like I think it was maybe 7 or 8 under, like 8 minors.
So I think now, especially knowing that, you
Yeah.
definitely have to tell your nieces and nephews because they're not even your
Yeah.
brothers and sisters. They're not
Yeah.
even legally your. It would be different if
Yeah.
you'd be like, yeah, you weren't even legally adopted. So like, they're not
Yeah.
your brothers and sisters. They're your nieces and nephews by law
Yeah.
and by blood. That's not right.
Yeah.
Like this. Oh my goodness, my brain is just like, what is going on? But I know it
Mhm.
happens all the time because that's what
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen in kinship care though. I've never seen it happen like
Yeah.
that in kinship care. Because to me, CPS is just like threw y'all to your siblings. It's like, oh good, we don't have to worry about
Mhm.
these 10 kids. That's
Yeah.
what it
And
seems like.
I think it was mostly just because we belong to like the biggest, we belong to LA County, so it's the biggest
Yeah.
department in social services, and they just kind of were like,
There's
you're
somebody
not,
that wants them. We're not gonna fight it.
yeah, you're not in danger at the moment, so like, I guess you're fine. And that was it. And that's how kids like slip under the radar and just like,
And go missing because
yeah.
that's what I talk about all the time because who knows they didn't do background checks on your siblings, they didn't do home studies,
Hmm.
they didn't do financial checks, they didn't do any of that, and then they could have turned around and gave you all to somebody else,
Hmm.
and then you're gone and no one
Yeah.
knows and there's no record.
Yeah.
And that's how kids get trafficked all the time. Like, it breaks my heart, but then it also like invigorates me to just keep going and keep advocating because,
Hmm.
and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your
No, of
story
course.
because like it's so eye-opening, like,
Yeah.
and it's systemic, it's very systemic, and it could have
Hmm.
been solved when your mother died and there was that original case opened.
Yeah.
Why did they drop the ball there? Because like we said,
I have
in
no
y'all's
clue.
case, thankfully 10 kids didn't end up dead or missing, but
Yeah.
y'all could have very easily ended up dead or missing, if,
Yeah.
especially if they just threw you with a family member who wasn't checked, or even like
Yeah.
they didn't do home, like they didn't even come in and check on y'all like after every couple years, just left y'all.
Hmm.
So now, okay, so let me ask you this: you're in college. How do you apply for FAFSA? Because that's technically not your mom. So how do you do? You're not a dependent of them.
We use my biological dad's taxes. Um, and he's a senior citizen now, so
Oh, he ain't got no money.
yeah, and my mom's dead, so
Yeah, because that's literally your parent.
yeah, yeah. We just use their information and
Because that's literally still your dad. Like, that's
hmm
why I was like, how do you get your FAFSA? How do you get your funding without the tax? Because the federal government, oh, they finna check. They finna
yeah,
check. They ain't finna just hand you some tens of thousands of dollars without checking. And they would have been like, no, you're not the parent. So that, all right, that makes sense.
yeah.
This is illegal. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not informal. This is illegal. Informal, I don't even know what an informal adoption is. This is an illegal adoption. I'm so happy though that you did get through it. And I'm happy that your sister did take
Hmm.
care of you. I don't know your sister and I don't know you. I
Hmm.
just learned a bit about your story. But from what it sounded like she just wanted to help y'all. And like,
Yeah,
and she did. But
they both did. And then they were the age that I am now. They were 21 when all of this
and they're and that
happened.
and young and dumb,
Yeah.
because like at a 30 years old. But I also do this for a living, so I do know the laws. I know the adoption
Yeah.
laws. I know I'm not a social worker, but I work hand in hand with social workers every day, and
Hmm.
therapists and people in the system. And she could, if she would have legally, if she actually would have legally gotten permanent guardianship over you, y'all would have qualified for assistance. Like, you would have qualified for like food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare. Like,
Hmm.
like y'all didn't probably have to struggle. She probably worked her ass off
Yeah.
to get you guys where you are. But I'm like, babes, you didn't have to struggle like that if you
Yeah.
went the official way.
That's what I tell her now. And she's like, "Well, it's 'cause like I didn't know that was a thing 'cause she's like we had never interacted with the system at all. Like my parents always provided 'cause our parents are very like born in the 50s, Mexico, so
Mhm.
very traditional, very like everything set one way, so she didn't really know anything. Like to her it was like and then she was growing up like in the 90s. She was in high school in the 90s, so seeing all of that like play out just kind of like scared her 'cause they were just
Mhm.
in LA, it was like
It
not
was dangerous in LA
it
in the
was not
90s.
good. Yeah, it was not good. Like,
Especially
yeah,
for Latino people. So like, and people of color, I think that a lot, and
yeah.
well, that's the thing, is the stigma around the system.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want them involved or coming in my
Yeah.
house or asking questions. But if you did go through the official way of permanent guardianship or even a legal adoption, because in the state of California, if you were adopted by her legally, she would have been qualified for a stipend, or at least
Yeah.
a kinship stipend. So
Yeah.
like y'all really wouldn't have had to struggle. Like that's why, but that's why I'm advocating. This is why I'm so glad that you shared
Yeah.
the story, just in case there is a 21-year-old out there who just got dropped off with their siblings and they think that they just have to. No, there are
No.
programs, there are systems set up to help you. It's not, it can be scary and daunting because it's just like a
Yeah.
lot of paperwork and a lot of official words, but there are programs there to help
Hmm.
families, and you got lucky every step of the way. Like
Yeah.
every step of the way, you've got, even like with your FAFSA, with going through school, there's not, no, you didn't get lucky. People dropped the ball. Honestly, if I'm being honest, the school
Hmm.
dropped the ball because they should have been like, because
Uh,
then how do they know that that's even true?
yeah.
You could just been a random person that she kidnapped and then now trying to put in
Yeah.
school. Like it was true, but like, how do you know that's even true?
Yeah.
Like I can go find somebody with the last name Dillard, go kidnap their son and be like, that's my son. Because you know what? So the dad died, and I'm now the big brother. Like, how do you can't prove any of that? Like this
Yeah.
every step of the way, I feel like people drop the ball, but I'm so glad that it wasn't at the worst detriment, because it could have been a
Yeah.
lot worse
It
for
could
you,
have been a lot worse.
way worse, and especially and you'll start to see once you get your degree and you get out there working these stories and what these kids are going through. Um, and I think you're going to be able to have insight and be like, no, yeah, no, that ain't right. That's something
That
feels fishy,
it doesn't add
like,
up.
math ain't mathing. So, oh my goodness, Liz, this conversation has been so eye opening. It has just been so eye
Yeah.
opening. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing. And I'm so happy that you are in the social work field, and that you are going to make a difference for other like kinship care and foster youth and adoptees, and just like spreading that, like this needs to be known about. These illegal
Yeah.
adoptions have been happening for years, and now it's even worse because we have DNA tests, so people aren't even, they're doing this and then lying, and then people are finding out that their mother's their sister, and it's a lot. It's a lot, and it can be
It
traumatizing.
is.
And who's paying for that therapy? Therapy ain't cheap. Therapy's not cheap.
Yeah. It is not cheap.
It's not cheap. You over here traumatizing me, not by my choice. Then now I got to pay for therapy. Nah, I don't think so.
No.
Liz, I ask every adoptee,
Hmm.
and that's like, are you even an adoptee? Like,
That exactly. Now I'm like, what? I'm just like there. I just exist.
You fall under the umbrella of kinship care, so you do fall
Yeah.
in our community,
Hmm.
foster care, kinship care, and adoption. But this is why I love this show, because it's like, goddamn, we got everybody's experience here. But if you were to be, if you had, if you, sorry, I can't even.
You're
Get
good.
this.
You're good.
If you were to find, by chance, I asked this question, if you were to find a youth that went through a similar experience than you, what advice would you give them? But like, your scenario is so unique, but just, I'm still going to ask the same
Hmm.
question. If you by chance found a child in the
Hmm.
exact same kinship scenario, what piece of advice would you give them?
I think for me, I think I would still push for an adoption or some form of like legal guardianship, just because things could have turned out so bad for me, but also just kind of giving me that peace of mind of like my dad won't come back and just take me away because I'm still technically his child. Like that was always my fear, like growing up. So just kind of really pushing for the adoption, even if it's like um before you're like 18 or once you're 18, if you can still do that, definitely still do that. I'm still trying to figure out how that works just
Yeah,
so I could,
you can do an adult adoption.
yeah.
If you want her to officially adopt you,
Hmm.
she still can. And there are, I mean, there are benefits, of adoption. And not really. I mean, for wills,
Hmm.
I'm just think like the only benefit is for insurance purposes up to the age of 25. So you could legally stay on her insurance up until the
Hmm.
age of 25. But it sounds like your biological father is retired and have some sort of
Hmm.
something that you qualify for too. So, um, yeah, I mean, the only reason that you guys would go ahead and go ahead with the adoption now is that you just both wanted to.
Yeah, just like give me that peace of mind of like I was a wanted child. Like I didn't just happen and now I'm just like a responsibility you just took on is like sort of what I've been grappling with lately. But yeah, definitely push for an adoption, make things official if you can, even if it's like too late and there you don't gain anything from it, just it'll give you peace of mind.
I love that. And I hope that you, whatever you do decide, rather if it's adult
Hmm.
adoption or you just keep moving on, I hope that you feel secure in your decision because, like I said,
Hmm.
this is your story. This is your experience, no one else's, and it's only up to you to make that decision.
Hmm.
And thank you so much, Liz, for sharing that with me. You know, you educated me today, and I'm gonna start to do some digging and some research and like because we need program, we need maybe like if this is happening so often, we need more
Hmm.
safety nets for this not to happen. Is there any social media that you want people to follow you at? Do you want anyone to know where you are? You just want to stay anonymous?
I mean, yeah, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's at LIZETTE.cm, so Lisette.cm, but no one can ever spell my first name, so there you go.
Perfect. Well, Lizette, thank you so much for coming on to the show, Warts of the State podcast, and sharing your very, very interesting and
Mhm.
it's interesting, it's different, and but it still falls under kinship care, and it should be. We need more stories like this so we can
Mhm.
make a better system, you know, so we can protect more children. But I appreciate you coming on,
Yeah.
and like I say every week, y'all, always shine your light because you never know how your story or experience will help and guide a person out of the fog into their true healing as an adoptee or former foster youth or a kinship placement in this case.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Lizette, and I will see you online.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Talk to you later.
Yes.